Welcome and greetings to all. I am Shenlong Pen Dragon, the Lore Master. So as always, a quick disclaimer, I don't own any of the images or the story in this video. All the credit for these belong to their original sources. So to recap on last time, I told you the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I do hope you enjoyed that video. If you haven't seen it and would like to, then do feel free to go back and see it. I might include a link in the description. But for this time, we're going to be discussing the legend of the red and white dragons. So who were these dragons and why were they fighting in the first place? So let's start off with the red dragon. As we can see here, we have a Welsh flag, and the red dragon itself is representative of Wales. It is often referred to as Draig. That is the Gaelic name for a dragon of any description at all. Draig appears in a lot of Welsh culture, and even in the modern day it's quite a big symbol of pride for them. And understandably so. I mean, who wouldn't want a dragon as their symbol? So the white dragon represents England. There is no generic name for this dragon. It does sometimes have a name depending on which story you've read. Probably the most modern and recent name I've heard for this particular dragon is Albion. However, I will go into where that name comes from in a wee while. It is just sort of a modern adaptation, and it's unlikely to be the true name of this dragon. So these two dragons actually have two stories about them. The first one is the original Welsh mythology. According to that, the dragons were viewed as a plague, the second of two plagues in fact. The reason why they were thought of as a plague is because when the white dragon actually initiated the hostilities and attacked the red one, the red dragon's resulting screams and shrieks were apparently so terrifying that within Wales and within Britain as a whole, primarily Wales, all the men lost all the ability to do anything. They just lost the will to fight, work, be with their families, just more or less lost the will to actually get up out of bed in the morning. And apparently the women were so terrified that they actually lost their unborn children during pregnancy. Now, as you can imagine, because this was primarily focused in Wales but did eventually spread throughout the rest of mostly England, the people of Britain saw this as completely and utterly devastating. It was a complete and utter car wreck for them, more or less, and as a result of this they viewed it as a plague. So the next question to really address is, how did the humans actually handle the dragons and deal with the plague itself? And this is what the actual main story focus is. So the idea that the people of Britain came up with was to dig two pits. The first one is found in Oxfordshire in England, and this is actually the image that you can see on the screen just now. This is the Oxfordshire pit. The idea was that the dragons would eventually get so tired of fighting that they would fall inside the pit, where there was a trap consisting of a cauldron full of mead, which had been dug into a lower section of the pit and sunken in. Then over the top of this there was a satin sheet, and I'll go over why this satin sheet's important and why the cauldron's important in just a few minutes. So what the story states is that the two dragons started their fighting in the sky, and eventually got so tired of fighting in the sky that they were forced to land, and began fighting on the ground instead. According to the original mythology, the dragons were able to change their form and shapeshift, so they took on different animal forms. Exactly what those forms are, I'm not sure. I believe there's some variations depending on which story you read and hear. However, what most of the stories seem to have consistently is eventually the two dragons got so tired of fighting that they actually transformed into pigs. And yes, you did hear me correctly, pigs. And they actually fell into the pit, and then fell into the cauldron. The satin sheet would then get dragged into the cauldron and wrapped round the dragons due to their weight, and thus trapped them inside. The dragons were then so tired and thirsty that they actually drank the mead, and they drank so much of it in fact that it actually put them to sleep. Thus the humans actually managed to capture them. They then moved them to the second pit, which is in a place called Dinas Emirs. I do apologise if I pronounced that wrong. So where is that place in relation to Wales? Well, this is actually that place here. It's found in Snowdonia National Park. It is indeed a real place. The mountain that you can see in the far distance, that's Mount Snowdon. It is the largest mountain in Wales. And it can get pretty nice weather up there. It's good for hiking. The national park is quite celebrated. A lot of people go there year round for hikes, cycling, etc, etc. It's a pretty good sort of adventure-based holiday resort. Moving on to the actual importance of the story, the two dragons were then put into a second pit. Exactly where in this photo that second pit is, I've got no idea. It doesn't specify the exact area. It just says it's in Dinas Emir somewhere. So the idea is that this rock pit was then sealed and the dragons were trapped forever inside, never to be released again. Thus, the people of Britain have been saved from the second plague. So, moving on to the second story of these two dragons. It was written in 1136 by a man called Geoffrey Monmouth. Now, his book is a falsified or fictional history of British kings, and according to him, Merlin saw these two dragons fighting in the sky, and he viewed them as the Celtic people and the Saxon people. He believed that the red dragon was representative of King Arthur and the Celts, whereas the white dragon was the Saxons. He chose to view them this way around because the white dragon was the one that had initiated the hostilities and attacked the red dragon. I will go more into this story in just a wee bit talking about who actually won that particular skirmish. There is something I do want to quickly cover first of all, though. So, do we see any occurrences of these two dragons in modern culture? Well, the answer is yes, we do. We have these two guys right here. So, focusing on the left-hand image first, this is Hyodo Issei. He's the main protagonist of a Japanese light novel and anime series called High School DxD. The idea of Issei is that he was once a human, a high schooler, who was murdered and reborn as a devil. The idea is that after becoming a devil, he slowly learns to live with his new abilities and new powers as a devil, and he eventually discovers that he's actually possessed by this red dragon called Drake, who is referred to as the Welsh or Red Dragon Emperor. So Drake himself is almost like a mentor character to Issei. He teaches him how to more or less be like a dragon and survive all the various conflicts and fights he gets involved in, and just to get through all the hurdles that are put in his way. So when we come over to the right hand image, now this is actually where the name Albion comes from. It's the name of the white dragon in the story. Albion is referred to as the Vanishing Dragon, or the White Dragon Emperor. Albion is actually possessing another young Japanese man, this one called Volley Lucifer. Now, Volley is actually a human-devil hybrid. He's an illegitimate son of the former Devil King Lucifer, who in the story is actually killed in a war with heaven. So the overall sort of take on these two dragons, personally I thought the actual series did the representation of them quite well. The idea is that both dragons have essentially died, or at least their bodies have died, and their spirits now possess something called sacred gears, which are like weapons, or armor if you will, which are used by these two characters. In terms of Issei, he has this red gauntlet, and in terms of Volley, it's these two wings, which you can actually see on his back in this image. The idea behind it is that over time, the sacred gears have passed to a variety of different individuals, and these individuals have continued the fight on these dragons' behalf, fighting each other, quite often to the death, and sometimes it's also depicted that the overall power and the lust for power that these people gain actually causes them to drive them mad. So far in this series, there's no evidence of this happening to these two particular characters. I won't go too much into it because I don't want to give any spoilers. So just the final question to really address for these two dragons is there an ultimate or clear winner between them? I did promise that there was a winner in the second story for that particular skirmish. What that particular story states is that Merlin observed the red dragon winning. What Merlin believed was that this was a sign that Arthur would eventually defeat the Saxon forces and become king of the Celts. And in the original Arthurian legend, we see that this is the case. Arthur does defeat them in the Saxon War, and does take on the crown of the Pendragon. Pendragon, coincidentally, is a Celtic name that means son of the dragon, which is why Celts have the dragon depicted in their mythology quite commonly. It's often a reference to their kings. However, eventually Arthur does actually lose to the Saxons, and in the true history of Britain we do see that the Saxons conquer primarily England, and thus we have Anglo-Saxons, whom are in turn eventually defeated when William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066 with his invading Norman forces. So how in the Arthurian legend did Arthur lose? It was really mostly because Mordred, who's sometimes depicted as his nephew and other times depicted as his son, leads, or at least aids in leading the Saxon force, along with a number of Celtic traitors, some of which were actually Knights of the Round Table who betrayed Arthur in one of the stories. Mordred, although yes, is the son of Morgana, who is Arthur's half-sister, is indeed sometimes depicted as Arthur's son as well. The idea behind this is that in the disguise of Guinevere, who was Arthur's wife, Morgana actually seduced Arthur in order to have Mordred as part of her revenge for Uther, who was Arthur's father, murdering Morgana's own father, or having him murdered so that he could claim his Morgana's mother as his own wife. In terms of the overall original Welsh mythology, there is no clear winner at all, because both dragons get trapped in the cauldron, and they're trapped inside the rock pit in Snowdonia. For the anime series, there is again no clear winner. It's just a continuous fight through time up until the modern age, where both dragons are fighting with Issei and Vali. So that is the end of this particular story, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening. If you did enjoy it, then please remember to like and subscribe for more lore, myths, legends, and stories. I am Shenlong Pendragon, and until next time, remember, knowledge is power.